hey!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Thank you all so much for stopping by. Yeah, I had to redo this entire video because I accidentally deleted some files that related to the last Umineko video that I did, so I had to restart and it was just a whole entire thing. Yeah, not my smartest move, but anyways, we have a new video today that actually does talk about Umineko. Now, I do want to be clear that this video, while we do talk about the cosmology of Umineko, that I also want to talk about Featherine most of all. Kind of like combine both these two topics into one idea to get a grand total, outcome of what and how strong the Uminekoverse truly is, because the Featherine does in fact scale to the cosmology of Umineko. I mean, it just kind of makes sense when you really think about it. Featherine is without a doubt the strongest character in the series. So literally that cannot be debated. Even though I've come around to liking, Beatrice a lot more, but facts are facts. You gotta take it, take it how it is. So now that we've covered that we'll be talking about the whole entire world of Umineko and Featherine, we can firstly and finally get into the cosmology of the series. Firstly, before we go into the domains of Umineko, I did talk about a lot of this stuff before in separate videos, but I wanted to have one concluded, concise video of Umineko, and that's what it is. Firstly, I want to talk about, showcase some explanations about the domains in Umineko. Again, we're not going to talk about each individual domain as of right now, which we will save for later, but I wanted to start off by just saying that Featherine's true form transcends all of these domains, which I will prove later on in this video. These are just basically just shown as a basis for the cosmology and why it's very important. So if you really want to know the power of Umineko, make sure you pause the video and read them. I am not gonna read them. I'm not your babysitter. You're a fucking big boy. Use the goddamn mouse. Before we go any further into the domains, we need to firstly establish that there are higher layers or higher dimensions that exist within the fragments of the verse. The dimensions are quantifiable and infinitely superior to the lower ones. Even though Battler was a human soul who had no extraordinary power like being a finite or endless witcher demon, well, just because he exists or it exists in the meta world, it's already, he could technically already affect the entire chess world, as he is being infinitely superior to the point of a being that's able to recreate past worlds just by analyzing or just to analyze Beatrice's decision. But moreover, I want to go over the fragments and what they mean to the verse, because the fragments actually play a huge role into not only the domains but the whole entire cosmology of Umineko. Fragments in Umineko, or When They Cry, are prisms representing parallel universes with different possibilities. The Sea of Fragments is filled with an endless number of these and thus represents a multiverse. The different decisions taken by the characters, circumstances, environment, and other various variables pave a way for the story to play out in different particular ways in different fragments. Think of it kind of like the many worlds interpretation theory. It's just MWI. That's basically what it is. Infinite worlds, infinite parallel multiverses, infinite timelines, etc, etc, etc. With that being said, Higurashi actually, it's a little bit different when it comes to fragments, but basically compared to Umineko, because even though it's all one congruent verse, Nasu, Tsukihime, Kara no Kyokai, kind of the same thing with Higurashi and Umineko. They all have their fairly consistent uses, as they are all briefly connected together. Not briefly, they are connected together. But now that we've talked about the fragments and why they are important, establishing multiverses, parallel worlds, etc, etc, we can now talk about the higher dimensions that exist within the domains. Here it states that some people or someone in a higher domain would see everyone in the lower domain as fiction. The person being referred to in the last image is Featherine, who is in the third domain, and she transcends the entirety of the witch domain. Again, we'll get to more of this later when we get to her and talking about the creator, or her pathway to the creator and all that shit later. Now, I know this is hard to believe, but the human domain is the lowest domain. The domain that transcends the human domain is the witch domain, and then the domain that transcends the both human and the witch domain would be the third domain. Truths can even be an entire universe. After all, each episode is called a truth created as a tale by the game master in a chessboard, a kakera. A kakera is also another term for fragments, but let me give you some more explanations about kakeras and their importance, because they play, again, a huge role into the versus cosmology. cosmology. For example, they are crystallization of concepts such as different worlds, possibilities, and fates, kind of like the fragments. Beings of higher worlds like the deities that reside in the higher domains can merge fragments to create stories. So again, now that we head back to the first domain, in short, anything viewed from a higher dimension is just non-existent. These are the explanations of the dimensions that are within Umineko. But now, with that being said, let's hop back to the fragments and La Kakera. Let's talk about these pictures. These explain the fragment transcendence that exists within the series. At first glance, these three words are independent. They are connected somewhere. This explains that while they are separate Kakera, they are still connected, being stories of the human domain. Also, to add more credibility to these statements, I want to show you the connection, or well, the more on connection. The key phrase here is that the space war world and the school light novel world are connected by a hierarchical relationship. Basically, it works like this. While these stories are limited to the human domain, they can be directly connected through a reality fiction hierarchy as a computer game from one world that is still in its own Kakera, but in a lower hierarchy. Umineko uses the concept of game boards and pieces as a game being played between beings on a higher dimension. The meta world around them, the mystery of Rakenjima. The human domain and its higher layers is like a game board to the higher domain. The white cells on the game board represent the human world, the normal human world, while the black cells represent the supernatural aspects of the human domain. Now let's take your attention back over to the dimension. Dimensions were mentioned before, and the difference between higher ones was already established. But I want to expand a little bit more about the dimensions in the verse because they play a huge role like everything else, and everything is connected back to the human domain as a starting point. Schrodinger's cat box is awfully simply referred to as the cat box. It's a reasoning technique that asserts the multiple truths about an event that can exist in parallel events or worlds that has not yet been observed. It is a loose metaphorical application of the real-life quantum physics thought experiment Schrodinger's cat. In Umineko, Schrodinger's cat box is used to describe the state of Rakenjima from October 4th to October 5th, 1986. In Umineko's reality, truths are treated as physical constants. They can be particles, wave functions, and they can even be conflicting forms at the same time. Oh, also any of them can be abstract theories that can only be refuted when you open the cat box. Or a very simple way of understanding this is when the work shows the only and single truth about two or more, or an even endless suppositions that conflict. Here it is referred to as a multi-layered world, hinting back to the Kakera that we talked about earlier, again being directly correlated. Why it's important! These cat boxes exist all throughout the verse, including Hanyu's cat box from all the way back in Higurashi. Now, there exists a higher dimension where the narrative of the story is stopped and the pieces of higher beings can fight with abilities such as the red or blue truths, while normal beings aren't even aware a place like this even exists. Now, with that being said, we can finally talk about the witch's domain. The witch domain is a domain that transcends the human domain like I stated earlier. The witch domain, or the world of the witches, is the second domain and is the middle of the two extremes, different from the world of the gods and the human world, but the witch world can create fate and even play around with it. Oh, and they have the freedom to just basically do whatever they want. I mean, they do have certain limits and restrictions since the world of witches is made up of thoughts of the beings that are also purely abstract, that, oh yeah, they lose all meaning if they fall into the depths of oblivion. But basically what I'm saying is that they can do what they want almost, but they have like restrictions. So it's funky, but you get what I mean. The world of witches is like an infinite ladder. Therefore, an infinitely layered world exists where these layers are called endeavors, or the steps of endeavor. And we will see these in the next sections as the famous fragments or territories that lead to the bottomless depths. And any witch who takes a wrong turn or step falls into these depths at the bottom of the seas will just be there. So with falling, let's talk about the bottom and the underside of the game board. This is the boundary between dimensions, the boundary between domains. So what I want you guys to do right now is that I could go over each of these scans that I'm showing up on the screen, but I'd rather have you just pause it and read it so you can get a full understanding of why these are very important. Seriously, I expect you to read these if you're gonna like truly take this video serious. Now, since I mentioned the Sea of Oblivion, let's now talk about and why it's important to the scale of Umineko. The depths of Oblivion oblivion, or the Sea of Nothingness, is the endless void at the bottom of the Sea of Fragments that encompasses the Witch Domain. This realm is like the world of Gap. However, this is the underside of Featherine's chessboard in the third domain. The main difference is that in the background of the infinite ladder that is the world of witches and that has no concept of life or death. This also includes Burncastle, by the way, who is Featherine's Miko, someone who constantly revives her from boredom. Relieves her, that's the right word, relieves her from boredom. Featherine at the end of the story uses this realm to bury the magic ending the meta world side. Now, these screenshots also show that Burncastle can find someone from the depths of oblivion, and given that Featherine sees Burncastle, and the rest of the Witch Domain as fiction, Burncastle cannot oppose her. It is very safe to assume that she cannot oppose Featherine. But now that we've went over the human domain, I want to give you a quick TLDR of what's been said, because I know for a fact I lost, you fucking idiots. Each fragment transcends the last. There can be an infinite number of fragments inside a cat box, Schrodinger's theory, as we said in the first domain. A being of the human domain cannot transcend into the witch domain on their own, as shown by Gap's world. Now, again, I know we said move on to the witch domain earlier, and I did give a quick little description of the witch domain, but now I want to talk about the witch domain even further. The witch domain is again a higher domain, sometimes referred to as the world of the gods, but not always. Nothing of the human domain can physically reach the witch domain, only being able to be seen as a Kakera, and all of the human being domains. The human domains is nothing but a chessboard to the witch domain. In other words, viewed as fiction. The concept of time also gets vague the closer one gets to the witch domain, to the point of where it actually just stops existing entirely. The language of the gods is beyond that of all humans, to the point that humans aren't able to understand concepts that are even being conveyed to them, or concepts that are within that said domain. Getting into the domain of internal evolution is exceedingly rare, but Beatrice is a special case, as she has the endless magic to grant endless evolution. This grants, again, endless evolution and supports the infinite hierarchy in the witch and third domain. Again, she completely transcends the human domain plus the witches completely, as the witches completely transcend all limitations to the human domain. But again, there's still a little bit of restriction. Now, I have to include this because this showcases the infinite hierarchy inside the witch domain. The higher one goes throughout the layers, the less restrictions and the more powerful they do become. Here is more context to that hierarchy. Here we have a structure in the witch domain, the Sea of Fragments, and well, inside the sea there are fragments that can be represented as lower worlds in the witch domain and even worlds of the human domain. All of these layers of the witch domain all transcend them, as proof of what I just showed with the infinite ladder. You get what I'm trying to say, with each fragment having an infinite structure, and then the infinite structure is being transcended by the domain being transcended again and again and again. Oh, it can get so confusing. But anyways, this place is also subject to falling into oblivion, as shown here. Also, the cat boxes are not limited to the human domain. They can also contain layers of the witch domain. For example, Beatrice's cat box, where the human domain's worlds are viewed as Kakera, also falling into oblivion, persists here. This is a layer, Beatrice's cat box, again, standing above the previously mentioned part of the Sea of Fragments, which is the meta world. Here, the worlds of the human domain appear as a game board. This is where the higher beings begin to play their so-called games. Oh, also, this is another superior layer to the meta world, or considered purgatory. And again, the cathedral exists here, which is a courtroom for these meta beings. There's also another higher layer, this being a place over the normal layer, and it is also possible as it applies to all the layers in the cat box. Oh wait, what's that? Another layer? The Golden Land is the highest plane in the game board, to the point where that while most of the entire cat box was destroyed, it stayed standing, being regarded on as an existing on a higher floor than the higher floor. So we just keep transcending layers one after another, bro. Oh yeah, here's another layer too, by the way. The Game Master exists beyond all of this. Game Master, not a true layer, but I mean, it is a Game Master being beyond it. Oh, yo, what up, Battler? Damn, I didn't think I see you up here. You scale kind of high, aren't you? Damn. The Cathedral of Burncastle's cat box and the Witch's Theater, this is a layer that is a part of Burncastle's cat box. Yeah, I just said that. What the fuck? That's so redundant. Anyways, it's being created by merging the Kakera together. By this point, I think we can conclude that there are superior layers and layers stacked on top of one another that are infinitely transcending one another, given the infinite ladder and the Kakera that we talked about. God, I really hope the fuck you were paying attention in this shit. But now let's talk about Featherine's study. The study, as Erica said, is about the world of the Great Witches. this is a higher reality, and it is outside the entire witch's domain, from which all tales of the witch domain are also merely just fragments from the books or the scripts, and it's totally, again, outside the witch's domain. So again, the third domain is beyond the witch's domain, which contains Kakera and Fragments, which has infinite hierarchies, that transcends the human domain, which also has infinite hierarchies. Holy shit! At this point, it's pretty blatant reality fiction transcendence. Here is the realm where Beatrice was stepping on the position of a creator, like Featherine was, according to Bernkastel's letter. Now, there's also a Kumasawa saying that this is not the first time Beatrice has stepped there. Now, but with that being said, I want to move on to the City of Books. The City of Books is the highest shown reality of the witch domain. This is an enormous reality holding endless books, each being their own worlds. The height of this place is quite unknown, but is a very, very high, given it is restricted to only the witches of the Senate and the Great Witches. So now, on top of all the Kakera and the multiverses and everything like that, you have the City of Books, which also showcases the infinite possible multiverses and timelines and the infinite transcendence and hierarchies, which is a part of the highest level of the witch domain. Oh my god, are you guys fucking following this around, bro? I might not be the biggest Umineko scaler or the most knowledgeable to say about Umineko because I'm more fate, but like, god damn, bro, like, reality fiction transcendence has been proven to be in each layer, with it stepping in the ladder. Listen guys, listen, there exists an even higher layer, referred to as the spectator's rows and seats. This is the spectator's row. Now, the third domain is a domain where the great witches live, and it is very far, far, far higher than the City of Books. From the perspective of these great witches, the gods or creators, the tale of beings of the witch domain. Now, this is the best description I can describe the third domain. The third domain is a domain shrouded in mystery, but of what we do know, it is a place Featherine returned to after touching the kingdom of God. Now again, she did not fully reach the kingdom of God as she did turn back. However, her existence still lived there and was there. She could be a creator. This is where Beatrice started to initially evolve into, and that's just very important to say. This links back to the endless evolution, which is supporting of the being infinite and is worded as if stepping into your level, and it is entering a deeper version of the hierarchy. So this could also be referring to as the steps taken from the hierarchy into the third domain, but since the third domain is not equal to the creators, it can be assumed that it can be assumed to be a part of the ladder, meaning that the third domain is a part of the ladder, and then the creator's domain, the kingdom of God, is above that ladder, which is where again Featherine almost made it but turned back, which also gives and makes us go to the next point. Beatrice began an internal evolution as shown here, as it takes steps into the world, meaning that it is another infinite hierarchy which exists within the witch domain. But how large? Infinite. That's what. The voyage of the creator has no endpoint, as it's shown right here. These scans are to show the hierarchy is infinite. I just can't not understand. I can't tell you enough. And if Featherine would be considered to be infinitely above that, above high 1A, well, I mean, you already know where this is going, right? So at this point, we basically know that all the domains have an infinite hierarchy. This domain transcends the witch domain, this domain being the third domain, to the point of where it's merely just a game board, which is funny because the witch domain viewed the human domain as a board game too. So I mean, I just want to repeat this for good measure. Everything that has been explained so far to this point should be quite understandable. I've explained it with many images, and I've explained different parts of different explanations, proving my point, showing the relevancy of each individual scaling and relating to the cosmology of Umineko, thus also relating to Featherine and where she stands. The Sea of Oblivion is a thing that encompasses everything so far. This puts the Sea of Oblivion at least high 1A scaling. At least a high 1A scaling. Honestly, you could fucking go higher than that at this point. A lithic modality? What the fuck is that, bro? Yo, this shit is just blatantly in here. Now, beyond Featherine's avatar in the third domain, Featherine's true form, which exists something that cannot be properly explained and can take forms or multiple forms of actors as stated before. Featherine's true form or being is greater to everything else in the series so far, which is again why Featherine can directly relate to the cosmology of Umineko. Umineko. With that being said, the human domain is a set of infinite transcendent kakura. Basically, you could argue that the human domain has a high 1B structure, to put it in simple terms. The wish domain has an infinite ladder of transcending steps leading into a high 1A plus structure. Then we got to the third domain, which is even a higher layered 1A infinitely layered structure, which is above that, which follows the same transcendence rules as before, given the Sea of Oblivion, the Kakera, everything we said so high so far. God, I'm fucking high at this point! And then we get to Featherine's true form. Her form is treated as Featherine or Hachiotoha, whose appearance, as it can be depicted as many different people, well, essentially just gives her transcendence. I don't know how else to explain it. I can't even say it. I can't dumb it down. She just has transcendence. And honestly, Featherine could be argued for tier 0. Like, she could. She could. With Umineko's cosmology, you could scale her to tier 0. Absolutely. Beyond the expansions of the 3 domains lies the Kingdom of God, the last boundary that Featherine reached before the Creator. At this point, the number of restrictions is almost non-existent, with only beings related to one's meaning and self. Beyond this boundary lies the Creator, boundless, omnipotent, and freed from all restriction. That is what Featherine is. Beings who reach here lose control of their self and meaning to become the Creator. That is what Featherine could have been if she did not turn back. So let me explain why the cosmology of Umineko is tier 0, and for the cosmology to scale to Featherine, vice versa. Featherine transcends all 3 domains, which have an infinite hierarchy. She exists outside all of the layers of fiction in the series as stated earlier. She is aware of everything going on in the verse, and she even tells the story herself. This alone puts Featherine beyond the realm of infinite hierarchy. On top of that, she almost reached the realm of the gods, or the kingdom of gods, whatever you want to call it, which was a creator, which is literally transcending the 3rd domain, which is already insane as it is. And then, what more needs to be said? Genuinely. Featherine exists beyond infinite dimensions, hierarchies, concepts. She is beyond anything conceptual, mathematical, narrative. I mean, she literally transcends the narrative structure of her own cosmology, which contains every metaphysical and conceptual system. Isn't that the literal definition of a tier 0 character? Please tell me, like, am I wrong? A being who is completely transcendent over any and all forms of hierarchical extensions. That is Featherine. A being who can create and destroy logical spaces that contain infinite possible worlds within a framework, sorry. That's Featherine. This is why also Void Shiki can be scaled really close to Featherine. The root is the same, or can be as same as the realm beyond the 3rd domain. I want you guys to understand that. Featherine is and can be considered the strongest in anime, light novel, manga. Yeah, arguably she really could be. I totally 100% see it. I truly don't see any other character winning against her. Even if it's characters like Void Shiki that can get close to her, she probably would not win in the long run. Like, just no. But anyways, you guys know the full power of Featherine and the cosmological structure of the verse. I mean, I could say more about Featherine's hexes, but basically, I don't need to. She can do everything. She's got a lot of cool scans, but she can do basically everything in anime and fiction. So, well, Beatrice, I still like you the best in Umineko, so I guess I'll do a video about you soon. And Battler, now that we've talked about the cosmology of Umineko, I don't need to go over everything in a video. I can just talk about hexes, which is very nice. So anyways, guys, yeah, like the video. So verse battle videos are coming next on the YouTube channel. God, I can't fucking talk!